became a voracious reader. And then inevitably I stumbled into the magical reality that's actually surrounding us. And I think Rudolf Steiner, one of my favorite philosophers, writers, speakers of all time, put it best. And he basically, his concept was is that we're in an Ahrimanic deception, or whole civilization, all civilizations all over the world right now, in the great thrust of ideas and ideals, we've been thrust into a deception. And the Ahrimanic deception is this idea that that's dead, this is alive, no, that's a rock, that has no life force, calories, count calories, not life force. Don't worry about the chemicals we're spraying, but you need this many grams of protein. So that eventually I was washed clean of those Ahrimanic deception ideas or ideals. Now, what does that mean, Ahrimanic deception? What Rudolf Steiner says, that there's basically two forms of evil in the world that are informing us. I say evil, but we could also use parasitism, or we could also just say like guardrails that are saying, hey, you're off track. Go back in the middle here, because that's really what it is like. Evil is kind of like a way of getting our soul back on track. This is the Rudolf Steiner perspective, and became my personal perspective. And what ended up happening is I started realizing what Rudolf Steiner had said in the deepest way, is that right now we're in a polarity of materialism. Maybe not you, maybe not me, but geez, in the outer world out there, people count how many yachts they got, how much mansions, how much money's in the bank, this, that. I mean, it's all about the dollars. It's all about the money. And it's also about the scientism worldview, which is we're going to explain everything through science, trust the science, science this, science that. What about this? Science, science, science. But right there, immediately, when I first came across that stuff, I started realizing science can't quantify nor predict a synchronicity. So there are phenomena that are outside of being able to even be scientifically analyzed, which is very important. And they usually are impregnated with meaning. Like, for example, I was telling you earlier, I went outside into the jungle yesterday to relieve myself on a tree. And I was walking down the path and I looked down and there was an avocado sitting up, perfectly ripe. And it was from my best tree too, by the way. It was up on the hill. So it rolled down the hill right to where I was on the path and was sitting up. And I was like, huh. Now, for me, one of the things that I learned over the years is that every human being has a superpower of some sort. They have a superpower of some sort, and you got to figure out what it is. Now, for me personally, my main thing is public speaking, but the phenomenon that occurs around me is something will fall and land standing up. It's a phenomenon. It goes on, and everybody has this going on. They just go, oh, they don't look at it, or they pretend it's not happening, or it's a reality distortion effect that every human being has based on the consciousness. And that's how this avocado was. It was sitting up, and I was like, wow. And then when I picked it up, I was like, it's unhurt. It's perfectly ripe. Like, wow. And so, this is more of a way of looking at the world as being filled with all kinds of interesting and beneficial and beneficent energies, spirits, however you want to describe it. And that worldview eventually, it's like waves reshaping the beach. It doesn't happen the first exposure to it, but eventually you go, oh, people are they're deceived by materialism. You can also be deceived by the other form of evil, by the way, or parasitism, or the other guardrail on the other side of the road, which is escapism. And this was core of Rudolf Steiner's philosophy. And when I landed on Rudolf Steiner, I finally was like, this guy he's just something else. I mean, he left behind 1 million pages of work, bro. 1 million pages. Let me just chunk that into the numbers, because let's get Ahrimanic and we'll chunk it down to the numbers. That's 50 to 60 pages every single day, Monday through Sunday, from age 15 to 65, every single day. Just think about that and think that one through. And so when I realized that, I was like, whoa, there's something really different about Rudolf Steiner. And so his philosophy has become very popular lately because people were starting to realize, like, whoa, this guy was right. He was right. What an amazing thing.
Dude, he's even got the there's the Steiner schools, which are, they honor the human being in such different ways in terms of their education and development and the processes they go through. There's some, and even just thinking that it wasn't in a time of Because now, like writing 50, 60 days, like words a day, you pump it in a chat GPT, you might even get something, get something going. But this, we're talking pre-internet, this is
Pre-internet. So these are the
pre-computers,
internet or
pre-phones. This
writing.
is
It's like it's really hard to write. You're like maybe today we could go, okay, you got a computer, you could just bang stuff out, chat GPT, whatever. But this guy, he didn't have that. He had typewriters in his hand and he's speaking. So a lot of his stuff was transcribed. It's just fascinating to, see these really interesting people in history. And when you plug into Rudolf Steiner's whole take on our reality, it's a magical reality. I mean, Waldorf education is educating the child. That's what his educational system was called for children. And by the way, it was Waldorf education got its name from the Waldorf Astoria cigarette company, because the owner of that company back in Germany back in the day wanted his workers to have like daycare for the kids and wanted good education for the kids. And so he hired Rudolf Steiner to come in and do the education programs for the kids. And that's where the name Waldorf comes from. It comes from the Waldorf Astoria cigarette company.
that
Is that
is
hilarious?
so trippy. I did not see that coming at all. And actually, that probably opens us up into a really cool conversation in just a moment. But one of the things I wanted to double click on was just, yeah, it's really interesting feeling into our Aramaic forces, and like you said, like that's over embedding us into materialism. And then we've got these like escapism is the other force, and those are kind
Yeah,
of
he
those
called those
Luciferic,
Luciferic forces.
the
Luciferic. You're
Luciferic
familiar with that.
forces.
Were you familiar with this before? You are, aren't you?
Well, yeah, a little bit around. We've had some very interesting conversations with some Rosicrucians on the podcast. Robert J. Gilbert. I'm not sure if you've come across his work, but he puts this all in frame. And similar to how you described it, it's these forces. We demonize them, but actually they're like. And I love the way you introduced it so cleanly. Is like these are actually course correction mechanisms. Even if you look at them as fallen angels, these guys are playing a really tough role in why they're doing this so that you can wake up to your light. Touchwood,
Well
really
said.
trippy. Really
Yeah,
trippy.
like the demon, whatever. The demon is actually in a very difficult position because they're actually trying to help you actually by going, don't come this way, go that way, the other way. You're off target. And so that's the philosophy that kind of backs everything that I do. We live in a magical reality, and what Rudolf Steiner was describing with his biodynamic farming is essentially a form of magic, right? You mix this stuff from the heavens, this stuff with the earth together, and boom, there you have the mystical union of the opposites, and all of a sudden you've got biodynamic prep 500, biodynamic prep 501, biodynamic prep 502, and these are amendments that we use on this farm, for example. We're a certified biodynamic farm. And Rudolf Steiner was really probably credited with developing the whole idea of a standardization of quality for food. So right on the heels of biodynamic farming came the organic food certifications, which started, I think, around 1940, and it was Rodale in Pennsylvania that sorted that out. But it was based on all his people were Rudolf Steiner people, so it really came from Rudolf Steiner.
Hey there, Inspired Evolutionary. If you absolutely loved this, well, then here's a full conversation with this guest on the Inspired Evolution podcast. Check it out now.